You survived Friday. Thank goodness for Friday. Russ Gibb jumping up and down at Group W Cable here in Dearborn, Michigan. And do I have a guest for you today? This is a guy, is the first citizen. He's the first citizen of Dearborn, Michigan. The Honorable John, better known as Jack O'Reilly. And the mayor has consented to come down here today because, as you know, in yesterday's papers, all the papers were filled with his State of the City message. So we invited the mayor to come down today to talk about the state of our city. And I got to tell you some things so that you know straight up. I'm always criticizing the media, so I think you ought to know my position with the mayor. Quite frankly, I voted for him the first time he ran, and I voted for him the second time. I think I was one of the first guys to come out with a commentary on radio in his behalf, because I honestly feel that this is a sincere public servant. This is a man that I voted for, so you know where I'm coming from. This is not a hostile interview, and if you think I'm going to tear into the mayor, you're wrong. Hey, I could criticize the mayor, but we can criticize every person that's doing something. What we want to find out today from Mayor O'Reilly is what's going on in our city and where's our city heading. So you hang in there. We're going to put on some spots to pay the bills, and then we're going to get right on with an interview with Mr. or John or Jack or His Honor, the Mayor O'Reilly. We'll be right back. Well, back again. Russ Gibb, and my guest today is the Honorable John O'Reilly, the Mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, and a man who probably gets more bellyfuls of compliments and complaints than any citizen in Dearborn. Is that what it's like to be a mayor?
That's about it, Russ. Sure is.
Jack, may I call you Jack?
You can call me Jack. You always have.
Well, no, not really. I used to call you John, but all your intimates called you Jack. So I thought, well, I want to be intimate with this guy, so I'm going to say Jack. And so I started to call you Jack later on in the career. You were always John because you were a police chief when I first really became cognizant.
Right.
And I got to tell that story. I know this is your interview, but I got to tell this story.
Sure.
I had called. I was living in East Dearborn, and there was a little park behind us, and there was thievery going on with bicycles. And one morning I was walking my dog, and I saw this great-looking bike, this incredibly expensive-looking bike, a 10-speed. And I said, my goodness, somebody's left this bike here. I better call. So I walked over to the police phone. There's a phone right on the corner there where you can call. And I called, and I said, I would like to report that somebody's left a bike and it's going to get stolen. They go away, and in a few minutes they say, just a minute. Somebody will be there. And in a few minutes, there was the mayor riding on a bicycle coming down, and what it was a decoy. Do you recall that story?
Yes, I do, sure. That's, I think that was the second time we'd met. The first time was when you were teaching at Maple School, and you had my son Dennis as a student.
That's right. And I think in those days I was sporting fairly long hair.
Yeah.
Never had a beard. Yeah. Never had a beard.
Yeah, I kind of suspected that you were a little on the liberal side in your philosophy, but I've later come to believe that that might not be the case.
You know, Mayor, I got to tell you, what really was going on is I've always been fairly liberal socially. Mm-hmm. You know, how people live, I think that's up to them. Fiscally, I guess I'm a conservative, and that's why I've been following your administration, because you've had the toughest job of any mayor in the country to cover.
It's been tough.
Because as I recall, years ago, the Ford Motor Company paid.
I think in the good old golden years, the combined industry and commerce in Dearborn paid 81 cents for every dollar that the city or school spent. So the homeowners were enjoying, 19 cents out of every dollar, which is pretty good.
Sort of a free ride in a sense when you think about it.
Well, it was a good.
It was a good ride
sure
while it lasted.
Yeah.
But now you're the man that has had to govern over us while we've watched that switch around.
It's been quite a switch, although Dearborn, people should not be misunderstand. Dearborn still has what would be generally perceived as a good, solid industrial tax base. 1982, for example, the industry and business paid 58% of the tax, so that 81 has changed to 58. But still, the homeowners are paying 42 cents on each dollar, which is a good industrial base.
What has been the reaction that you've had from the citizens on this change? What's their feeling? Do they want to blame the guy in office?
Oh, I think that there are people who do, and I understand that. I think we used to joke in the old days. I can recall conversations with people like George Bondi when he was on the council, and we were talking, that someday there would be a period after Orville Hubbard, and we talked about how difficult that would be, and it was generally agreed that maybe the guy who succeeded Orville would be like a one-term mayor at the very best. And so we knew, that
it was going to be tough.
Going to be tough, even without the economic problems.
But what really happened in there? Now, you read the paper sometime, you get the impression by some groups within the city that this is the fault. The taxes have actually risen on the homeowner, and it's the fault of the administration. And how do you respond to that?
Well, we try to respond by stating the facts as nearly as we can say them. And I understand that people... It's a very complex topic, first of all, because it isn't just that simple to say that there has been a shift in property tax, because there are other factors which are equally important. Back in 1978, when I took office, the average home was assessed at about 13% of true cash value.
Value, right?
So that, in a very real sense, gave the homeowner an additional break. Well. In 1981, we had the state passing a new piece of legislation which was called equalization by class, and it, in reality, to simplify, required that Dearborn meet the provisions of the state constitution, which says that all property in the state shall be assessed uniformly, not to exceed 50%. And at this point, we are about at very close to that 50%. In fact, some cases over. I agree with most of the citizens in town who say, "Hey, I'll sell you my house for what it's assessed. They can have mine too." Because of the
That's right.
factoring process. I agree with that. We've hopefully got a little good news this year. We may see a reversal of that. I think we'll see a decrease in assessments.
Is that part of the thing that you're projecting in your State of the City message?
Yeah, it really, we're projecting that there probably will be a drop in residential property values this year.
Are we moving ahead in the city?
I think so. I think you have to consider that we've been operating in a very tough economic environment. We've been able in our business communities, in some instances, make great strides. Others have been very, very frustrating. East Dearborn, for example, in particular at Schaefer, Michigan, has been a sort of a classic example of some real progress.
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, we have fewer vacant stores. I'm going to tell you, the landlord, Mr. Templeton, who owns most of that property along Schaefer Road, is getting about twice as much per square foot as he used to get.
And we make that up in some taxes, don't we?
Yes, we do. Sure we do. We also saw the classic example in economic development of the private sector carrying the majority of the load. In Schaefer, in Michigan, we had private investment of close to $15 million. And that has been really the secret of success in that area.
What do they call it? Leveraging? Is that leveraging?
That's right.
When you put the money in?
That's right.
Well, now, is that going to go on in the West Dearborn development?
It will go on in West Dearborn, but because of a whole series of factors, and if we were going to get into the West Dearborn situation in depth, I think we'd need to have a program to discuss West Dearborn, because it's been very complex. If I could simplify the project, we have not had, primarily because of the economic conditions, we haven't had this private investment. We've come close. We've had some situations where we were almost ready to move with a development, but weren't able to put the package together financially, because investors, when they can get 19 and 20 cents, they're a little reluctant to invest in the private sector. But we haven't given up hope. We started to talk about tax increment financing in 1978, in January, my first month in office. It's taken literally that long to develop a program, which we have now in recent months. We have had the council approve a West Dearborn developmental plan, which hopefully will provide the seed money for this private investment. But I'd like to point out that we have to be sure that we encourage the private sector, that the city government with taxpayers' money is not going to be able to, quote, restore and revitalize West Dearborn without a major investment. That area needs additional residential development. It needs additional retail, new office buildings, probably combination office and retail along Garrison. All of those things can become and will become a reality just as quickly as we can get as the national economy turns around. I mean,
That's right. We're part of a greater whole.
I would, let me just say a little bit in addition about West Dearborn. It's sort of a minor miracle that there are almost no vacant stores in West Dearborn along Michigan Avenue, because in the last 5 years, 25% of the stores have gone out of business in that area.
That's right.
I don't know if you know that or not, but
I read that in the State of the City.
Well, it's a great tribute to the viability of that area, that during a period when stores are going broke, and when a store closes up and leaves town, it isn't because he didn't like Dearborn. It's because he didn't make money.
That's right.
The name of the game is for this businessman to succeed. We've seen in each case, in each and every case, there's been another investor able and willing to come into that store, and there's been some great success stories.
Well, the Toys R Us. That's an incredible story.
Toys R Us is one of 125 stores.
Chain.
And I recently heard the regional manager say that of those total 125 stores, Dearborn, Michigan had the best 2 months, the best opening of any store in their chain.
Now, and that's just a brand new development.
Sure enough, but that speaks well for the potential of the area. Fairlane Town Center, for example. Some people blame Fairlane for the decline in East and West Dearborn, and I'm not sure. I suspect that Fairlane did change the shopping patterns of Dearborn.
It has mine, I can say.
So that may be an honest claim, but regardless, Fairlane is still in Dearborn, Michigan, and it's still a business community in this town. They have increased their volume every year, including 1982, since they've been here. I, for example, recently heard a report from the manager indicating that the Saks store over there was the only store of their group that had yielded a profit this year.
And if they're making money, then they're paying taxes.
That's right.
Have we increased the tax base now under your administration?
We're increasing it steadily. I think that considering the economic conditions in 1982, we did amazingly well in new construction. We reported $34 million in new construction in Dearborn, Michigan in 1982.
And what would that add approximately to the tax rolls?
Well, in terms of hard cash dollars, we have to divide that amount by half. There will be down to 17 million, and then apply the tax factor of 15 mils.
Are we ahead or behind?
Oh, we're ahead.
Yeah, we're ahead. That's
sure.
the main thing.
Another figure that comes out of our Building and Safety Department, which is kind of the department that would give us the information relative to whether we're making progress or not, indicates that last year, 1982, we had almost $10 million in new modernization permits taken out by people in Dearborn.
Is that homeowners as well as businesses?
Yeah, but mostly homeowners. These are people who've been fixing up their homes, putting on a family room, putting on brick siding, just investing, if you will, in Dearborn, Michigan.
I've noticed we've had some major road resurfacing going on.
Yeah.
One in particular, this winter, after that great storm, Outer Drive around Pelham was incredibly torn up. And someone said that the city actually helped the county to get this going, that we actually loaned them some money.
We had to pay the county share. See, actually, the total package is paid in part by the federal government, part by the state, in part by the county and the city. The county did not have the money. They didn't have the money for the engineering design studies necessary to get the project started.
And there are homes right on that street.
Yes, that's right. And we were able to advance the funds on a loan basis to get the project completed.
So that was a major accomplishment as far as I was concerned, just as a citizen. Now, talk about garbage collection. I read your State of the City report, and I was amazed that when you took office, it was $1.50 for each pickup.
No, it's $1.47 now. Correction. It's 97 cents for each stop in the areas that are being contracted, which now would mean most of West Dearborn. Stops that are still under the city jurisdiction, because we've been phasing out gradually, cost us $1.40. It's an example, by the way, of a public service which can be done, obviously, more efficiently and more economically by the private sector as opposed to the city. And I think it's important that in city government we realize that the city is responsible for the delivery of services to the public. We need to explore ways in which those services can be delivered most efficiently and at the lowest cost. And in those areas where the private sector can do that, whether it's motor maintenance or whatever it might be, we have an obligation in representing the taxpayer that we take a hard look and explore all of those other options, and we're doing that constantly.
I noticed that the number of city employees has fallen. One of the criticisms in the last mayoral election was that we had more, or I think I read in the news, that we had more employees per $1,000 or something.
And we still do more than most cities. We deliver more services than most cities.
Well, that's true.
Very few police departments still respond to each and every call.
And ours do.
And we do, unless there's a nice storm. Or there are times, of course, when there might be an exception to that rule. But generally speaking, we do. Very few departments do that. We expend a great deal more on recreation per capita than any other city in the area. We expend more money on libraries, on the historical museum, many areas. And so it is true that we enjoy a better service and we have more employees than most cities.
But you're cutting those employees.
Yes, we are.
But mostly through attrition?
Totally through attrition.
Totally.
No.
Do you find that when you start into these programs that you get a built-in, shall we say, reluctance of the, the powers that be in the employees' unions to say, well, wait, we don't want that. You're putting us out of work. Is that a battle?
Sure, it is. I recognize the role of any elected labor leader. Their role is to represent their constituents, the same as, in fact, in discussions with labor leaders, at the very outset, have been quick to point out that it is important that they understand my position and I understand theirs, that there is a little built-in adversary relationship there.
That's right.
And
you represent all of us.
That's right. And if we can, meet under those conditions and we both understand that, we get along better. And that has been the case. I've found
we have had no major strikes of employees.
We had one strike since I've been mayor. It was by the Teamsters Union, and it lasted about 10 days. I think that was the second strike in Dearborn's history. I think there was one back about 15 years ago, too.
But we're an aging city, Mayor, and there's a lot of things that are going to have to be done. Yeah. Have you made any plans for that?
Yes, we do that every day. Well, there's a lot.
Every day, eh?
There are advantages in being a mature city, I suspect, but there's also many disadvantages, and some of those disadvantages relate to what the trades people now call the infrastructure, is the new term. In fact,
You sure you're not going to university? You sure you haven't been down to Harvard?
I saw a little cartoon in the current issue of the National League of Cities publication showing obviously a city employee down in the sewer catch basin, but the sign up atop said the infrastructuralist at work. This is the new term, but nonetheless, infrastructure, of course, is the sub base of the city and includes all of our roads, all of our sewers. Mm-hmm. Our sewers are in some cases 60 years old or more.
And how long is the average life of a sewer? I'm not an expert on sewers, so you got to give me.
We really haven't found that out yet because.
You think we're going to have to replace it?
Oh, sure. We have to. We're looking at a project now. In fact, we've begun to budget for it, which would survey the condition of the sewers in Dearborn. And would you believe the cost of just the survey, which we made by television, through the medium of television, runs about $1 million to do the sewer system.
Just to find out what we need? To
find out what we need to do. And the reason that that's so necessary is because there are alternatives. There are some sewers that may need to be replaced. There are some that there's some new techniques now. There are liners which can be purchased, and they can be inserted in the sewer where where the size is okay. Well, you can't tell which of those procedures ought to be followed until you know the exact condition. So it's necessary that we conduct this survey. It presents a huge problem for the future.
Do you think some citizens will say, hey, that's a waste of money, we don't need that, they're working in my neighborhood, why should I? Is there that type of thing goes on?
Oh, sure. I guess, one of the first things you have to realize in any job, and whether you're a school teacher or what, is that you can't please everyone. You have to do the best job you can in acquainting yourself with the reality of the situation, listen to a lot of counsel and advice, and then, call the shots and make that hard decision.
Mayor O'Reilly, do you ever get frustrated, though? Doesn't it ever get tiring? You know, we're going through March right now. Today we're in finals in school, and in about a week the report cards will come out. And I'll have a whole list of kids coming in, each individually, each a human being, each with feelings, saying, I deserve this, or why did you do this? There are times that I want to say, oh, the hell with it.
Yeah.
Do you ever get that feeling?
Yeah, sure, every once in a while. But overall, you have to look at the total. And overall, the challenge, the rewards from accomplishment are very real, just as real as the frustrations. And
what's your biggest thrill? When you think of being the mayor of Dearborn, you'll go down in history now as the mayor of our city. What thing makes you feel good about being the mayor?
Well, I guess the recognition that I inherited the job during a most difficult time. And I don't want to sound now like I'm making excuses, but frankly, if my administration were judged in the same environment that had existed, you know, for so many years, I suspect I would have a pretty poor track record. And so it's absolutely necessary to understand the circumstances.
Take it in context.
You see, my predecessor, who was a fine gentleman and a man who I admired a great deal and a man who I worked for very hard, for 36 years, each year had more employees than he had the previous year. 36 years of growth. Starting in 1978, we have seen a reversal of that. I would really enjoy 1 year, just 1 year, in which we could even have the same number of employees. We haven't had that luxury. Each year, my friend Dan McCormick, who's my executive secretary, in January has come to me, starting in 1978, and said, Mayor, if you continue to operate the city with the same number of people, same replacement of vehicles, the status quo, you're going to be somewhere between $2 and $3 million short. And so each year we've had to begin the budget like that. And 1983 is no exception, and I suspect 1984 will be no exception.
It's a tough job, but I've noticed you've brought in a computer now. We have a new system that's monitoring police cars and city vehicles.
Right.
We have a, what's that pension thing? I was reading something about, I was amazed at the number of people that are actually working. For every employee that's working today, we have how many? Because people are living longer.
Okay, that's another factor. You know, when someone stands up at a publicly and says that Dearborn, Michigan has X number of dollars in the budget and Troy, Michigan or Sterling Heights or Livonia has less, they may not really be aware of all the factors. For every 10 employees we've got, 7 employees are retired. What does that mean? What it means is $4 million up front each year. When we look at that budget, first of all, in the old days, they didn't fund the pensions, and that's another tragedy because it would have been a lot.
Now you have to fund them.
We have what is called in the trade an unfunded accrued liability, which simply means we owe about $50 million to the pension fund because in the early days, that situation wasn't addressed. So right off the top, we have that $4 million, which has to be appropriated because that's the priority. It's the law of the land, and I'm not quarreling with that. The pensions ought to be made secure. But that's the price of being an older city. Again, not only the streets and the sewers, but the pension costs, and all of those things are difficult. In spite of all that, and I suspect this tour may be growing to a close here, and I would like not to leave on a negative note because I think the future for Dearborn is indeed very bright. There are many ways in which we can work smarter. Data processing is just one of those. We will be able to deliver a high level of service in the future in Dearborn, Michigan. There's no question about that.
Mayor, I thank you for coming down today. I want to invite you to this microphone and these cameras anytime you want it. All you have to do is pick up the phone. I know you have adversaries. All good men do. Some of them are very, very straight and honest and honorable men themselves. Sure. But I want to tell you, I have not had one guest, including some of your harshest critics, who haven't said that you're a decent man. And I think you ought to hear that. I think a lot of people feel that. I'm glad you're our mayor. I think you're an honest, sincere man trying to do a job in a difficult time, and I admire you for that. I couldn't do it.
Yes,
Mayor,
thank you. Think you could. Russ, think you make
Jack
a good
O'Reilly,
mayor.
thank you for coming.
Okay. Good.
Russ Gibb, I'll be right back after these announcements. The mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, John O'Reilly. It's a tough job, but we got a good guy doing it, and that's an endorsement. make of it what you will. Hey, for those of you that took time to view, thank you. For those of you who took time to drop me a card or a letter, I want to say thank you. But most of all, I'd like to thank you for just being you. Russ Gibb, at random.